What I did was I I instead of buying the airplane, I got my jet license. Okay, so I had that. So when I came back, I started flying with, but I did not have the Venezuelan, I did not have the jet on my Venezuelan license. So I had to revalidate my license, and I did that. And there was one guy who was, I had to do a check ride, so for the jet. And my friend said I could do it in his airplane. And what happened was the guy that checked me out was a really tough guy, and he had checked out my friend. So I passed. A lot of people fail when they got checked out by this guy. So when my friend saw that I had passed with him, he said, "Hey, I'm going to recommend you to the charter company where I lease my jet for you to be one of the captains." And so I started getting calls to fly not only his, but there were like 5 or 6 jets that were there, part of the charter company. So the owners would lease it to them and they would get money, make money. So this, it wasn't just a full expense. And so I started flying and building up my hours. Yeah, this was 77, 78, 79. So I started really building up the hours. So by the time I think 79 comes around, 78 comes around, I had enough hours to go to the US to get my airline transport pilot license. And so I remember my friend says, "Hey, Roger, can you go to over Christmas and take my jet? It needs to have its 100-hour check at West Palm Beach." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "By the way, could I rent it from you for an hour just to get my check ride for the airline transport pilot license? I already passed the written." And he said, "No, no, you go and you treat this airplane like if it was yours." So I remember, so I went, and I went with your mom, Bea. You were there, and then Cesar and Mari were going with us to stay that time.
Is that when we went to Disney and the Rudolph doll? I remember, or is that a different one?
No, no, that's a different time. And then, of course, the manager of the charter said, "Oh, since you're going, I'm going to add a couple more people." And so we ended up waiting forever and to leave, and we had to land in Maiquetía first, and then we had to land in Haiti, and so we ended up getting to Miami, West Palm Beach at night, which to Miami International, which is fine. I mean, I didn't have a problem with that. Then the next day we flew it to Palm Beach, and there I arranged for them to do the whatever, the 100-hour check. And I talked to the check writer, and we made an appointment, and I did my check ride, and I passed it. I got my airline transport pilot license. It was the same guy that had checked me out when I first got the rating, but it didn't have the airline transport pilot thing. So now I was in business because now I had that. I go back, and I think, yeah, okay, so that's how it worked. So here's how it happened. In that year, it was the 4th year, because I remember it was around our anniversary. I remember that's when I started working for them, right? So it was the 3rd year. Wow, it was 4th year. 3rd or 4th, I forget now, it doesn't matter. The thing is, March 31st, I'm walking, I'm leaving. And they couldn't believe me, and I said, "Yeah, I'm leaving." And then I go to the airport, see if they had any flights or whatever, just to walk around. And I run into this friend of mine from high school, and he says, "Roger, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm thinking of, I just finished my job here. I'm thinking of going to the national airline to fly DC-9 small jets." And he says to me, "No, don't do that." He says, I'm a co-pilot at the national airline. Come with me and fly there." I go, "No, my wife will kill me. We're going to be gone most of the time." He says, No, we don't do that. We work maybe 10 days a month, and the rest of the time you're off. You can even continue flying the small jets here." And I said, "Oh, that sounds great." So he takes me to the tower where the main office was, and we go upstairs, and it was a right moment, right time. They needed 4 captains to become captains. They were still flying as co-pilots, because everybody they sent for the DCA training failed. So this time they were looking for 4 experienced pilots with jet time. Actually 6. They needed 6, and they were in a hurry in a you know, one of these things. So when I walk up there, they already had 4. So my friend takes me up there, introduces me to the head of operations, tells him. So they said, well, he's got to go downstairs and take an exam. So I go downstairs. They give me the fuel system of the DC-10. I got everything. Then they asked me some question about flying jets, and I was a lot of hours. And I go upstairs, and the head guy says, "You're leaving for Holland on Sunday," which was our anniversary, by the way. And your mom didn't even know anything. And here I am, hired and leaving, and they give me the ticket. They gave me the whole thing, and then it was all like, you couldn't believe it. People sometimes spend years trying to get into an airline, and I'm going and say, "Oh, we forgot. You got to fill out the application." After I'm hired and everything, so I fill out the application, and then when we were all there, they said, "Oh, we got to send you to the psych eval." So they sent us to the psych eval, and I remember that because it's funny. The guy hooks us up to a alpha machine. And mathematics, you do all your study in alpha mode, pretty much. It's like a meditation. So it's so abstract, it's like, So my alpha levels were very developed. And the guy would say, he had this little light going around, and he would say, try to keep calms to slow down the light. And even when I held my breath, the thing would keep going. So he calls the factory in LA, and they say, ask him if he's had training in mathematics or something. I go, yeah, I've got a doctorate in mathematics. And I broke the machine, so the machine broke. And I always remember, I said, oh, this is crazy. This whole thing is crazy. And then 6 months later, I knew that if it wasn't crazy, you would never last in the airline, because everything was like that. So I go home, and I see Bea, and I go, Bea, I walked out of the Grays Licores job, and I got hired by Viasa, the Venezuelan airline, and on Sunday I'm going to Holland to train for the DC-8. And Sunday was April 3rd, our anniversary. So,
What did she say?
She was always supportive. I mean, it's amazing. She was as adventurous as I was. And so that Sunday, I left with, 4 of us. They sent the 4 of us that had jet hours, and the other 2 didn't have jet hours. They had turboprop, so they got left behind for the second course.
Didn't me and Mom go, or we didn't go that time?
Well, no, not exactly then, because the course was 2 parts. So I did the course, did the simulator, and then when I was there, halfway through, you guys went.
I remember.
And so you got to stay in the hotel. It was so much fun. And the thing was, it was a lot of pressure. And one of the guys, because we were in pairs in the training, and the guy was with me, who had been with the airline many years, but as a flight attendant. He was a purser, and he just couldn't handle it. So he had been flying for the local airline, so he failed, and he went back to his old airline, and that's where he did his whole career. I just found out last year he passed away in a stupid small airplane accident. Things catch up to you. He didn't have it to fly with us, so he went back to the local airline where the standards were not as high, and he paid for it at the end. Then there was just 3 of us left, so we were to continue. And I forget, I think we go back, and we went back, and then we had to go back again, or we stayed, I forget that part. And we have to do the more technical class. And I always remember that because we weren't meant to be mechanics of the airplane, but there were 2 Swiss guys, and the Dutch, always trying to get their money's worth. We were paying for the course, but they snuck these 2 Swiss who did have to learn the mechanics of the airplane into our course. So they were teaching it for them, even though we were the ones paying. So we would just sit there and sleep the whole day, and then the guys would talk to the other guys. So then all of a sudden they call us into the office and they said, we've heard that you guys aren't paying attention to this. And I said, well, it's because they're teaching to these guys the stuff that we're not even supposed to know. And the guy didn't believe me. And he said, well, I'm sorry, but that's not what the instructor says. He says, well, of course, he's covering his behind. And he says, well, I'm sorry. And I go, well, how do I prove it to you? And he says, well, the only way you can prove this to us is if you take an exam. Otherwise, you'll fail the course. And I'm going to call Venezuela and let them know. So this was Friday, and the exam was going to be Monday. So I remember there was 3 of us. One whose brother was a captain in our airline said, "I'm not taking no exam." He always had this attitude like that. The other guy, who was very influenced by him because they both came from the local airline also, was hesitant. And I said, well, I'm taking it. There's no way I'm showing up at home and my wife tell her I've been here for 4 months and not that I failed, I didn't take an exam. So I remember studying for the exam. It's all multiple choice, but there were 2 different types of airplane. And I remember it was like 1,000 questions. And I underlined the ones for one airplane in yellow and the ones that were for both in green. And I just underlined them, highlighted the correct answer. And it was funny because then Monday I took the exam. And when I took it, one of the guys, the hesitant guy took it and the other guy didn't. So I take the exam and I didn't even think. I just saw, I could see the yellow and the green when I was answering the questions. And then quick, da-da-da-da, I did it. And then you have to sit there while they graded, and you could see in their head that the instructor was there and he was grading with somebody else watching. And, you know, he thought he was going to watch me fail, and I got a 92. You should have seen his face when that happened. My other friend got a 45 or something, and the other guy didn't take it. So this is when they reported to Venezuela, and it was so amazing because all of a sudden, the head of operations calls me on the phone and says, "Hey, Kadala, yeah, good work with the exam. What should we do with the other guy? Because we're firing the guy who didn't take the exam. We're sending him home. But what should we do with the other guy?" So he was ready to fire my friend, so that was going to ruin his career, right? And I said, what do you mean? I said, we got to do something. Should I fire him? I said, no. You know, this thing was like, do you believe me now when I tell you that they were doing this for? And he says, "Oh yeah, that's typical of these Dutch guys. Because when we weren't in the company, we were nobodies, right? So, but now that I proved that I was right, that I passed the exam, now I was he was considering what I was saying. So he said, no, I agree. These guys are always doing that to us. But so what should I do with him? I said, well, just make him take the class over again. To this day, he remembers that because that was like the worst punishment ever.
But you saved his job.
He saved his job. He did his whole career. And then he lives in Florida, and we're good friends and everything. So, yeah, that was that. I get back to